Yeah. So can you tell us more about your project at Unacademy? Like what it like, what it was, and how did you go about it?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So the first project that I worked on at Unacademy was about the polls, or as they call like the multiple choice questions on the feed. So I remember when I joined Unacademy, so you know how like Unacademy has like an educator app and a learner app. Cool, yeah. So this was the core project that I worked on at Unacademy, and so like I said, they have a educator app and then a learner app, and both of those share like a common news feed or feed, much like Facebook's news feed. So think of it like just something that's between the learners and the educators to be able to like share content and like post questions and stuff like that. So that was kind of my setup there. But so when I joined an academy, so you can see like this was kind of the educator profile. You can see we were seeing like this trend so because it's like a learner and educator relationship, it kind of to really foster that, they learn educators would regularly post like these questions to keep like learners engaged. So like you can see kind of this example on my portfolio here. Gar, like I just took this as an example for the sake of this piece, but you can see he's been posting a question, and there's like people that are responding to that. So while the educators were doing this, this was something that kind of attracted like a lot of traction. Like people would really engage with questions they would post, and especially for like the Indian curriculum, like you know how a lot of the entrance exams have like multiple choice questions as they abbreviate for like MCQs. So this was something that educators would like really leverage to their like advantage, because like to keep learners engaged. However, there was no way for, I guess this goes both ways. Like say you post a question, you're like, hey, who is the Prime Minister of India? And you have like four options. Like it was purely like a text-based post. Like there was no way to sort of have like polls or like cards and stuff like that. And then learners would just comment on the post, be like, hey, this is my answer. So they would be able to interact with it, but not to the extent where they would know, hey, did I get this right? Or like, hey, if I did get it right, like how did that compare against like other people who answered the same question? Or like if I got it wrong, what's the right answer? And the only way for them to like know what the right answer was, and to wait for the educator to kind of post it on the comments and be like, hey, this is the answer. So they would have to kind of go back to that. So it was something that had a lot of people using it, but we hadn't, I guess we didn't really kind of get around leveraging what is more that we can do to make it better. So that's kind of like the context for my project at Unacademy. And so before we kind of dived into like what we wanted to be, we kind of stepped back and kind of decided some of the goals that we wanted to accomplish with what we're trying to go for. So like I guess I can read these. So some of the things that we wanted to focus on, or some of the things that we wanted to focus on, were creating interactive polls, educators to be able to create a series of multiple questions, and the learners to be able to get immediate feedback if it was right or wrong. Also have like this tally of like correctness score in the real time, and for learners to know how they performed against other students, like I said before. So given all of those, we kind of had this how might we statement, where it was like, so I can read it out. It goes, how might we make this question answer experience more fluid and reduce friction in that process? So that was kind of the thing that we would try to map back to when we started working on it. So I was responsible for kind of like the visual side of things, and I started off with like an initial analysis and conversations with the design teams, and kind of sketched out some of the lo-fi wireframes for that. So those are like here. And then there was like a lot of back and forth between me, Abhinav, and like Prithvi, who's also on the team, predominantly like me working with them before like kind of going to the Eng team. And then once I kind of had the green light from, I guess, senior designers there, we started working on the high fidelity mockups on Figma. I guess I could pull that up too. So kind of going into like different kinds of flows. So right here is kind of like the creation flow from the educator side, the answering flow from the learner side, so how they answer the questions and kind of like how they get the feedback. This just says ignore flow, so I guess we'll ignore that. Kind of going into what the animation would be like. So also I believe this was the first time I was really working with like micro interactions. And then really kind of going into the nitty gritty of like, hey, like what are the elements that go in there? Because I believe this was also the first time I was really working with like a design system in place. Like I did have the freedom to like think of like, hey, how this should look, but at the end of the day, it kind of has to look like what's in place already. So that was also like super interesting. So those were kind of like the flows. Some of them have like annotations, edge cases, stuff like that. Then we did like error states here. So these are like different error states that people could run into. So that was kind of like the high fidelity stuff. And then finally, my most exciting part of the project was making the Unacademy dribble shot. So those were like explorations, really trying to get the color right. And I think that that's the one that made the cut. And then initially we had, I guess I should have gone over this before, but we did like some of the research as to like how other companies or other question answer experiences are like. So I don't know if you know, like Word Coach by Google is like this thing where you could just search for Word Coach and it kind of has this quiz element to it. So we like drew some inspiration from that. So that was kind of like just like secondary research at the beginning. Let me share the other screen. Okay. Yeah, so I basically have those same screenshots from my Figma file on my portfolio too, because I think that's a great way to kind of show process, show that, you know, like I did a bunch of explorations and I did like a lot of flows and not necessarily like, you know, this, like not every iteration is going to make the cut, but at the same time it's like important to show like you know, like you didn't have this just one idea and like now you're pursuing it. So I think it's a good way to show like, hey, this is all the work I did, but then this is what made the cut, because I think that is what mapped back to like our how might we statement in the beginning. So I have those screenshots there and I kind of dive into like high fidelity stuff right after. So I really have this like zoomed in like hi-fi mock-up of what the core experience is. So I think another thing here is so you saw in the Figma file there's a lot of screens there, but you don't necessarily have to, I guess, put all of them. Like I really focused on what the core experience here was. So I think the first state here is the screen you land on as soon as you select that you want to make a question, and then what it's like to add options to it and then add more questions to like the same carousel series. So that's what I have here. And then once I show that, I kind of show what the process looks like in its entirety. So that's kind of like the flow. And then I have the learner side. Again, I do the same, kind of took the same approach of like showing what the core experience was, kind of really zoomed in on the nitgrit of things, and then going into like what the entire flow is. So that was that flow. Like you select an answer, traditional colors for like red for wrong and then green for correct. So showing that flow there and what it looks like if you got it wrong, what it looks like if you got it right. That was kind of like the GIF for what the micro interaction was like. I believe that was also my dribble shot. So I kind of wanted to show on what I worked on in terms of like prototyping. So that's how it looks. So I just put that there as a prototype. And finally, I talk about what the impact was for when the project got shipped out. So this was something that I only was able to update when it was really rolled out. But I think this having numbers on your especially if it's like an internship and it's something that you rolled out, like having numbers to support that really kind of like solidifies your approach to like your process and kind of shows like, hey, like you did this thing, but what did it really do out in the real world? So I think this is something that has helped me during my interviews as well. So I kind of just explicitly have all these numbers that I was able to get from like the team when this was rolled out. This was like this was the first iteration of when we were rolling it out. The feature was actually, I guess, was still in testing while I was there, but it was only rolled out when I had already finished my internship. But I had a photo of, I think this was the last week or something, like when we were really close to rolling it out, but it was also like my last week. So I was like, okay, I gotta take a photo of like, this is real. Like this was when the Eng team had already worked on it. Sure, because you can see it kind of looks different from what the visuals were on like Figma, but I was still excited to see like, yo, this thing is real, and like I could interact with it, like make a question. So that's just a photo of me on the day before like the official launch. That's me with the team. Abhinav, Nilang, me, Prithvi, Sneha. So I'm guessing you know some of these people.
Yeah,
And yeah, like kind of really just taking it back, talking about things I learned, what my experience was like, and what it was like to work on that project. Yeah.
that's great, man. Good stuff.
Yeah.